Have you ever had that strange feeling, like there's someone inside, behind your eyes, watching the world? Maybe it happens when you look in the mirror for a little too long, or when you suddenly wake up in the middle of a routine and ask yourself, wait, who's really living this life? Sounds like something out of a sci-fi movie, doesn't it? But it's a very real question, and one that humans have asked for thousands of years. In today's hyper-connected world, we often get lost in constant thought, planning, remembering, judging, worrying. And all the while we assume there's a thinker, a me, behind it all, controlling the mind like a captain steering a ship. But what if that idea itself is just another thought? What if behind the curtain of your mind there isn't a little you pulling the levers? This might sound unsettling, but Buddhist teachings offer a perspective that is both liberating and deeply calming. In today's video, we're going to dive into the mystery of self and awareness, exploring what really goes on behind your eyes. Is there truly someone there, or have we just believed in the illusion of a self for so long we stopped questioning it? Let's explore together. The mind like an ocean in motion. Thoughts come and go like waves crashing against the shore, relentless, unpredictable, and often beyond our control. One moment you're fully present, simply breathing, and the next, you're replaying a conversation from last week, planning tomorrow's errands, or worrying about something that hasn't even happened. These thoughts don't ask for permission, they rise on their own, pulled by invisible tide. You don't invite them in, yet there they are, rolling in, one after another, never quite giving you time to rest. Sometimes it feels like you're stuck inside a stormy sea, tossed around by memories, anxieties, judgments, and daydreams. And no matter how hard you try to stop the mental noise, it just keeps returning, stronger than before. This constant movement can be exhausting, but here's the thing. You are not the waves. You are the ocean. Deep down, beneath the noise, there's a stillness. Buddhism teaches that the mind's nature isn't the waves themselves, but the calm depth that lies underneath. To see this clearly, we must first become aware of the waves and how they move. Thoughts arise on their own, the dance of causes and conditions. We tend to think of thoughts as something we create, as if there's a little thinker inside us deciding what to think next. But Buddhist wisdom tells a different story. Thoughts don't come from a central command center. They arise moment by moment, based on causes and conditions, like sparks from a fire or ripples from a falling leaf. You don't choose them, not really. A smell, a sound, a memory, a passing feeling, any of these can trigger a whole chain of thoughts without your consent. This is the heart of what the Buddha called dependent origination. Nothing arises on its own. Every thought has roots, even if we don't see them. You may suddenly think of a friend, not realizing it was the faint scent of their favorite cologne that passed by, or a childhood memory might resurface because a song you haven't heard in years played softly in the background. We're often unaware of these subtle triggers, but they're always there, setting off internal reactions like dominoes. The beauty and the challenge is realizing that there is no one sitting inside your head thinking these thoughts. There's just a continuous unfolding, shaped by past experiences, present conditions, and subtle impressions. When you begin to see this clearly, the pressure to control your mind starts to soften. You no longer feel like you're failing when your thoughts run wild. You start to understand they're simply doing what they were conditioned to do. The domino effect of the mind. Imagine lining up a row of dominoes, one flick, and the whole sequence tumbles, one piece knocking down the next. That's exactly how the mind works. In Buddhism, this is known as dependent origination. Nothing happens by itself. Every thought, every feeling, every mental habit is the result of something that came before it. One thought leads to another, and before you know it, your mind has built an entire story from a single spark. Maybe it starts with a tight feeling in your chest. That sensation triggers a worry about work. That worry brings up a memory of your last mistake. That memory invites a wave of shame, which leads to a thought like, "I'll never get this right." All of it unfolds in seconds, and yet it feels like it came out of nowhere. But nothing really comes out of nowhere. That's the beauty and mystery of cause and effect. The Buddha didn't teach this as abstract theory. He offered it as a way to understand why we suffer and how we can stop the chain reaction. When you start to notice these dominoes falling, you can begin to step back, not to stop them by force, but to stop feeding them. You don't have to push the next domino. You can pause, breathe, and let the pattern soften. That's where freedom begins, not by controlling the mind, but by understanding how it works. If no one's in control, who's behind your eyes? Now pause for a moment. If thoughts are simply arising on their own, triggered by memories, sensations, and subtle impressions, then who exactly is in charge? Who's steering the wheel? We often assume there's a someone behind the scenes, a quiet self pulling the strings, filtering reality, making decisions. But if you really look closely and honestly, can you find that person? Try this. For the next 10 seconds, predict your next thought. Go ahead, just sit in stillness and try to see what will pop up next. Chances are you couldn't do it, because the very act of watching changes what arises. And in that moment, something becomes clear. You're not creating your thoughts, you're witnessing them. This leads us to a question that echoes through Buddhist teachings and the human heart alike. Is there really anyone behind your eyes? Or have we spent our lives assuming there's a thinker, when in fact, thinking is simply happening? Just like the breath, just like the heartbeat. What if that inner narrator you've always identified with is just another thought in the stream? The Buddha pointed toward this mystery not to confuse us, but to invite us to wake up. Not to a new belief, but to a direct experience. The realization that behind the constant mental chatter, there may not be a self at all, just awareness, vast and open, watching it all unfold. The mirror that has no face. Think of a mirror. It reflects everything placed in front of it: faces, skies, sunlight, shadows. But it doesn't hold on to any of it. The mirror doesn't say, "This image is mine," or "I prefer this reflection over that one." It just reflects, perfectly, impartially. And when the image disappears, the mirror remains unchanged, open, silent, and clear. This is one of the most powerful metaphors in Buddhist teaching for the nature of the mind. Your awareness is like that mirror. It receives every thought, emotion, and sensation. It sees joy, grief, boredom, fear, but none of it sticks. The reflections come and go, but the awareness stays untouched. And just like the mirror doesn't have a face of its own, your true awareness has no fixed identity, no name, no story, no ego. We spend much of our lives trying to find our real self, some core identity hiding deep inside. But what if, like the mirror, what we're looking for was never meant to have a face? What if consciousness is not something personal, but simply the open space in which all experience appears and disappears? When we stop trying to force the mirror to become something, when we just let it reflect, we start to see clearly. We realize that behind our eyes, behind all our thoughts and feelings, there may not be a someone in control, just a vast, open knowing that holds it all, without needing to claim any of it as me or mine. Anatta, the freedom of no fixed self. One of the most radical and liberating insights in Buddhism is the idea of anatta, often translated as not self or no fixed self. It doesn't mean you don't exist. It means that what we usually take to be the self, this inner narrator, this voice in the head, this sense of a solid me, isn't actually something permanent or unchanging. It's more like a process than a person. Take a moment and reflect. Are you the same you as 10 years ago? What about yesterday, even 5 minutes ago? Your thoughts shift, your emotions change, your opinions evolve, your body ages. So who exactly is this I that's supposed to be constant? Buddhism invites us to stop clinging to the idea of a self as a fixed identity, and instead see the self as a fluid experience, something conditioned, ever-changing, and not truly ours. Anatta doesn't ask you to believe in something new. It asks you to observe your direct experience. You'll notice that everything that arises in your mind eventually fades. Every thought, every mood, even the idea of who you are shifts depending on your mood, your memory, or the moment. And when you deeply see that, something amazing happens. A sense of space opens up. You're no longer confined to the rigid idea of me. You become more open, more compassionate, more free. This isn't about erasing yourself. It's about realizing you're not limited to the narrow, anxious identity you've been clinging to. Like the mirror we spoke of, awareness doesn't need a face. It simply shines, effortlessly reflecting everything that comes and goes, turning inward, searching for the self, finding silence. Let's try something together. It's not a trick, not a theory, just a gentle invitation to look inward. Close your eyes for a moment. Let your breath settle. Then ask yourself, quietly and honestly, who am I? Don't try to answer with words. Don't reach for a name, a job title, a memory, or a personality trait. Instead, look directly. See if you can find the one who is looking. Is there a solid me sitting behind your eyes, a controller pulling levers, or just a shifting collection of thoughts, sensations, emotions, coming and going, like weather across an open sky? This practice, simple as it sounds, can be deeply unsettling and profoundly freeing. Because what many discover is not a clear identity hiding deep inside, but rather a spacious kind of absence, not a blank emptiness, but a quiet stillness, a silent center that isn't centered on anyone, no permanent self, just awareness, watching the show unfold. The Buddha didn't ask us to believe in no self as a doctrine. He asked us to look for the self and see what's actually there. And when you look without grasping, without expectation, you begin to feel a subtle shift. The tightness around I and mine begins to loosen. You're not disappearing. You're just seeing clearly that the you thought you were was never fixed in the first place. And in that seeing, there's peace. A simple practice, watching without judgment. Let's try something simple. Right now, wherever you are, take a few slow breaths. Let your shoulders soften. Let your face relax. And for the next few moments, just watch whatever thought arises, whatever feeling surfaces. Let it be there. Don't chase it. Don't push it away. Don't label it as good or bad. Just watch. Maybe a thought pops up. What am I supposed to feel? Let it come and let it go. Maybe a memory, a feeling of restlessness, a bit of peace, whatever it is, just notice. Like watching clouds drift across the sky or leaves floating down a stream, your thoughts will come and go all on their own. You don't need to control the flow. Your only task is to stay present, gently aware, without grabbing hold. This is the heart of mindfulness. Not fixing, not fighting, just seeing. And with this kind of bare attention, soft, open, and kind, something begins to shift. You may notice a little more space inside, a little more calm. You're no longer tangled in the story. You're simply witnessing what's already happening. It may seem like nothing's happening, but this is the beginning of everything. When we stop trying to shape our experience and start simply being with it, the mind begins to settle, and in that stillness, clarity grows. Awareness is not a thought, it's the space that holds them. Here's something quiet, yet profound. Awareness is not the same as thinking. Thoughts come and go. They have form, texture, even tone. Some are loud and urgent, others soft and fleeting. They can be visual, emotional, analytical, or scattered, but awareness is none of those things. It doesn't shout or argue. It has no shape, no color, no story, and yet it's always present. Awareness is the open space in which thoughts arise and pass. It's not what you think, it's what sees the thinking. You can notice a thought, and then another, and then realize that something has been there the whole time, quietly witnessing the flow. That witness, that presence, is your awareness. And unlike thoughts, it doesn't change moment to moment. Imagine sitting by a river. Thoughts are like the water, always moving, but awareness is like the riverbank, still, steady, just observing. It doesn't grab at the current, it just allows it to pass. Many of us spend our entire lives identifying with what appears in the mind, believing we are the thoughts, but in truth, we are the space they appear in. Recognizing that shift, even for a few seconds, can open up a new kind of freedom. A freedom not from thinking itself, but from being trapped inside of it. The sky and the clouds, a gentle reminder of what you are. Think of the sky, vast, open, endless. Now imagine the clouds drifting across it, some light and wispy, others dark and stormy. The clouds come and go. They change shape, they shift direction, they cover and reveal. But the sky itself, it remains untouched. It never clings to a single cloud, never resists the storm. It simply holds space for it all. This is the mind, too. Your thoughts are like clouds, passing through, forming and dissolving, never staying the same for long. And your awareness, your deep consciousness is like the sky, quiet, vast, and always present, no matter what appears within it. Some days, your inner sky may feel overcast, filled with worry, anger, or confusion. Other times it might seem clear and bright. But no matter the weather, the sky is never broken. It never becomes the storm, and neither do you. You are not the thought. You are the space it passes through. This simple metaphor has helped countless meditators over centuries return to what's real. Because when we stop trying to fix the clouds and start remembering the sky, we begin to live from a place of openness rather than resistance. And in that space, clarity is possible, not because we changed the sky, but because we remembered it was never gone. Mindfulness and equanimity, the art of not holding on. In the midst of all this inner movement, thoughts rising and falling, emotions shifting like weather, mindfulness becomes the gentle thread that keeps us grounded. It's not about stopping the waves or clearing the sky. It's about watching it all with clarity and care. When we practice mindfulness, we begin to notice what's actually happening moment by moment without getting swept away. But mindfulness alone isn't enough. To truly rest in that watching, we also need equanimity, a balanced heart that neither clings to the pleasant nor pushes away the unpleasant. In Pali, this quality is called upekkha. It's not indifference, it's spacious presence, a quiet strength that lets things be without closing down. When we sit in mindfulness with equanimity, we start to see things more clearly. A painful thought arises, and we notice it without reacting. A joyful memory surfaces, and we enjoy it without grasping. We don't have to chase, fix, or resist anything, and in that allowing we become steady like the mountain, open like the sky. This is the art of inner freedom, to watch without judging, to feel without drowning, to be fully alive yet not entangled. Equanimity allows us to hold the full range of human experience with kindness and steadiness. It teaches us that peace isn't found in controlling life, but in relating to it differently, where ancient wisdom meets modern science. For over 2,500 years, Buddhist monks have quietly practiced something that science is only beginning to fully understand: the power of mindful awareness and equanimity to transform the mind. The Buddha taught that by observing our thoughts and emotions with non-reactive presence, we begin to break free from the patterns that cause suffering. And today, neuroscience is catching up. Dr. Jon Kabat-Zinn, the founder of mindfulness-based stress reduction, MBSR, brought these ancient teachings into modern clinical settings. His research shows that consistent mindfulness practice doesn't just reduce stress, it reshapes the brain. Areas linked to fear and emotional reactivity shrink, while regions tied to focus, empathy, and emotional regulation become stronger. The mind literally rewires itself through awareness. Neuroscientists using fMRI scans have found that people who regularly practice mindfulness and cultivate equanimity experience less activation in the amygdala, the brain's fear center, and more activity in the prefrontal cortex, which helps with decision-making and clarity. In essence, mindfulness helps us respond to life instead of just reacting to it. What the Buddha described as upekkha, a heart that remains balanced in pleasure and pain, is now being explored in labs and therapy rooms around the world. It's no longer just a spiritual idea, it's a psychological and biological truth. The way we relate to our experience shapes our inner world more than the experience itself. And that perhaps is the most hopeful part of all. You don't have to change everything around you to find peace. You just need to change the way you see, with awareness, with balance, with compassion. Living from awareness, not just the story. So how do we bring all of this into everyday life? How do we live from that quiet space of awareness instead of getting swept up in the constant stories running through our heads? It starts with small, simple moments, pauses in the middle of the chaos. When you're washing the dishes, can you feel the warm water on your hands instead of getting lost in a memory? When someone cuts you off in traffic, can you notice the rising anger without immediately feeding it a story? Living from awareness doesn't mean you stop thinking or feeling. It means you see those thoughts and feelings for what they are, passing events in the mind, not facts or commands. It means you don't have to believe every narrative your brain spins, especially the ones that say, "I'm not enough," or "this always happens to me." You start to respond instead of react. This shift changes everything. You begin to meet life with more space, more gentleness, more freedom. You're not locked inside the drama of the moment because you know there's a deeper place inside you, still, open, unshaken. And from that place you can speak more kindly, listen more deeply, and move through the world with a kind of quiet strength. This is mindfulness in motion, not just sitting on a cushion, but remembering again and again that you are not the storm, you are the sky it passes through. A modern life, a quiet shift. Meet Daniel. He's not a monk, he's not a spiritual teacher, he's just a regular guy, late 30s, lives in a busy city, works in tech, and for a long time, he felt like he was drowning in his own mind, always rushing, always thinking, always worrying about what might go wrong next. His mornings began with emails, and his nights ended in anxious overthinking. From the outside, everything looked fine. Inside, he felt completely lost. One day, out of exhaustion more than inspiration, he walked into a mindfulness class. No incense, no robes, just a quiet room and someone asking him to breathe and watch his thoughts. At first it felt ridiculous. Watch my thoughts? I am my thoughts, he thought. But something in him softened. Week by week, he started to notice the stories playing in his head, the constant judgment, the fear of not being enough, the pressure to be in control. And slowly he realized he didn't have to believe everything his mind told him. He could just notice. He could sit with discomfort without reacting. He could walk through his day not from the voice in his head, but from something quieter beneath it, noticing, breathing, responding. It didn't solve all his problems, but it gave him something deeper. Space. Space to pause, to feel, to choose. And in that space, Daniel discovered something no achievement ever gave him. Peace. Not the kind that depends on everything going right, but the kind that comes from being fully present with whatever's here. The middle way between clinging and resistance. In Buddhism, the Buddha spoke of the middle way, a path that avoids the extremes of self-indulgence and harsh denial. But this principle doesn't just apply to how we live in the world. It also applies to how we relate to our own minds, especially our thoughts. When most people begin to practice mindfulness, they fall into one of two traps. The first is clinging, getting caught in every thought, chasing it, believing it, trying to control the outcome. The second is resistance, trying to block thoughts, push them away, or force the mind to be quiet. But both of these approaches create suffering. One tightens the grip, the other creates inner conflict. The middle way offers something gentler. It says, what if you didn't have to do either? What if you could simply notice your thoughts as they arise without grabbing or rejecting them. What if you could relate to your inner world the way you'd watch birds pass across the sky, aware, curious, but not trying to catch them? This is the heart of mindful awareness. It's not about getting rid of your thoughts. It's about changing your relationship to them, seeing them as weather, not identity, movements, not mandates. And when you walk this middle way, you begin to feel something rare in our noisy world: balance. You're not pulled around by every wave, nor are you fighting the tide. You're just standing in the middle, calm, aware, free. Now, as we wrap this up, I invite you to try a quick yet powerful practice. Once this video ends, give yourself just 10 seconds. Pause everything you're doing, sit quietly, and gently ask yourself, who exactly is here right now? Don't search for an answer with your mind, just feel into the experience itself. Notice the silent presence behind your eyes, simply observing. Let yourself rest in that brief moment of quiet curiosity. As the Buddha once remained silent in the face of profound metaphysical questions in the Nikaya, sometimes silence speaks louder than words. The deepest insights aren't always about finding clear-cut answers. They're about experiencing the truth directly. So, here's your invitation. If this journey into the question of who's behind your eyes left you with a new perspective, like this video and share your thoughts in the comments. What did you feel when you looked within? And don't forget to subscribe. Let's continue exploring together.